Welcome to your weekly astrology forecast for June 3rd through June 9th. This week is about your continued process of becoming. We have a new moon in Gemini, and we also have the Sun and Venus making a square to Saturn this week. My name is Shawna McGrath. I'm a psychotherapist and an astrologer, and I'm really excited to share the astrology of this week with you from a psychological perspective. So before we go into exactly what's happening within this week, the broader context that we're in is we are fully in Gemini season. So we have Jupiter, Venus, and the Sun in Gemini. And all of this activity, these planets here, Mercury will be joining the party in Gemini here this week, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And all of these planets are moving towards a square with Saturn. And I want us to be thinking especially about Jupiter being in Gemini for the next 12 months or so. Will be in a square to Saturn over this time. So there's this theme over the next year of a desire to grow and expand and to really move into the fullness of your life, Jupiter. And then how do we make space for also the part of ourselves, the part of life that is Saturn in nature, that is about containment, limitation, constriction, and having boundaries, being responsible, and sort of creating a healthy containment or a healthy boundary around Jupiter issues. And then also bringing an expansion and exploration to our ability to have a sense of closure and feeling safety and security, because I consider Saturn also the element of feeling safe, secure, having a strong foundation. And so there's kind of this negotiation between these planets over the next year. So we're in that vibe in broad terms. And this is really important because Saturn will be in July stationing retrograde at about 19 degrees of Pisces. It'll move back to 12 degrees of Pisces in November. And so over the course of 2024, we're also having Saturn sort of move back over this area of the sky and over the area of your chart where it was this spring in 2024. So there's these themes around contraction, containment, pressure, and holding space for yourself to expand. Okay, so with keeping that in mind, that's the volume, the week in particular. We have kind of a lot of things going on. We have Mercury moving into Gemini on Monday, the 3rd of June. And so Mercury is a symbol of the mind, our ability to communicate with the divine, with the other world, and then also to think logically. So it's our ability to make meaning of things, our ability to connect and to communicate in a variety of different ways. Now, Mercury is moving from Taurus, which is about rooting into things and like really sitting with the content of something. It's moving into Gemini, which is more about a quick and fluid flow of things, a flow of ideas. And there's really an emphasis during Gemini season and also this week and the weeks to come around sharing ideas, exploring new things, and learning via exploring different experiences. So Gemini has this sampling kind of energy. And so I want us to be thinking about that. There's this kind of like movement and going here to there. And everything that you're doing now is a stepping stone to something in the future. And so this is really the beauty of Gemini and the Gemini-Sagittarius polarity is Gemini is about doing all of the little things now that maybe don't seem like they lead to a big thing, but when they all collect together, when we have a mass of many small actions, they produce something bigger. and this is Sagittarius. And so we need both of those. We need the big vision, which is Sagittarius and Jupiter, and then we also need this sort of like sampling and figuring things out energy of Gemini. Now, when Mercury moves into Gemini, it will make a conjunction to Jupiter. It's also co-present with the Sun and Venus, and Mercury will also make an easy flowing trine aspect to Pluto. And so there's a couple of things here. The way that I see this is there is an expansion for your capacity to communicate, to get into a mindfulness state, to increase your awareness of something, to go deeper into states of intense experiences, or whether that is spiritual experiences or connection with the divine or connection to yourself. There's this thing here around expanding the way that you are able to connect and make meaning, either more logically or more symbolically. And so that's going to, of course, depend on what's going on in your life. But I think this week there's this possibility around expanding your mind and doing so in a way that is both Jupiterian expansive and then also going deeper into an experience of understanding. Now, this may be subtle and it might be more of an internal kind of experience. That's my sense, because we're in a new moon period. So that in itself is more internal and introspective. And so I would just notice what you notice this week, as always. Notice the quality of your dreams while you're asleep, if you can remember them, even if you can just jot down a little detail, the things that you're thinking about, the things that you are ruminating about, the fantasies that you're having, the ideas that you're drawn toward, and what those might have to say for you. Mercury in this place really reminds us that everything that we're thinking about is in some way a product or a content of our psyche, and that is always information about what's going on with us in our lives. Now, the other piece of what's happening this week that also involves Gemini is that the Sun and Venus will make a conjunction in Gemini. So this means that they are together at the same place in the zodiac. And they're also going to make a square to Saturn. So this marks, more literally, this marks Venus's transition from being the least amount visible, because it's right next to the Sun. So we literally in the sky cannot see Venus at this point in time. So there is something around relationships, enjoyment, pleasure, beauty, self-love, self-esteem that is intensely internalized right now, that is very introspective, and that there is sort of a hidden quality to it. And then Venus will eventually become an evening star, visible just after sunset in late July. So before this, in the months before, Venus has been a morning star where we can see Venus just before sunrise. So there's kind of this flip where we think about earlier in the year, Venus has been visible at the beginning of the day, and now it will become visible at the end of the day. So there's this kind of this tone around looking at how, I think the Sun is also so connected to self-esteem and ego and differentiation. And so there's really this internalized place of sitting with how you identify as a unique individual, what defines you, and how you feel about that. Pleasant and unpleasant, how you do feel, how you want to feel. And I think that there is a moment in this week, because of this Sun-Venus conjunction and because of the new moon, where there's an opportunity to really sit with deep feeling, and even feeling that we might not necessarily have words for, that maybe is nonverbal in some way. And so I think that anything that you can do to give yourself space to sit with your experiences and to notice what comes up for you, this can be very helpful. Now, the other piece of this that is, I would say, maybe a little more external or a little more practical is that the Sun and Venus will also be making a square to Saturn. And Saturn is involved in this new moon as well. So Saturn is really present this week. There is this theme around clarifying, structuring, containing, being no nonsense about what it is that works for you versus what doesn't work for you. I think that when we have this configuration with Saturn square these planets, there can be a questioning of what maybe has been an illusion. Things come into focus, and it's really also about being honest with yourself, being authentic with yourself as best as you can at this point in time, and knowing that that is always a fluid exploration for all of us, myself included. And so there's this moment here where there's a lot of themes around inner experience and how that relates to self-esteem, feelings even of social connection, and how those things all intertwine together. Now, this new moon in Gemini is happening on Thursday, the 6th of June. It's exact at 5:38 a.m. Pacific time. And it's exact at 16 degrees of Gemini. And at this new moon, Venus is also at 16 degrees of Gemini. So this is like a really concentrated, there's sort of this like merging of the sun, the moon, and Venus. It's like, it can feel kind of, when we have a conjunction that is this close, it can feel difficult to sort of separate out which is which. And there might be this, this feeling this week where I'm kind of getting this image of like a vortex or a whirlpool, where it's like everything is all coming together. And the themes here are around seeding and fertilizing a new possibility, especially around ideas, questions that you have, concepts that you're exploring, sharing ideas, socializing, and I would say even having this flowing state of mind, this exploratory state of mind. And then with Saturn making a square to this configuration, there is a questioning on how this actually, like, what do things actually look like in your life, and how do you feel about that? And I think Saturn in a square can also symbolize coming up against a challenge, whether that is an internal challenge, an external challenge or pressure. Sometimes those things are interconnected. Sometimes there's a synthesis that happens there. And I want to say too about Saturn that Saturn is a symbol of the things that we typically cannot wish away, that we cannot manifest away, that we cannot, like Saturn really reminds us that we only have control over our own selves and our own responses. And even then, I would say, you know, we tend to not be able to directly, explicitly control our thoughts and our emotions. And so Saturn reminds us that there is a limitation to the things that we can control, and that the more that we can accept a limitation, but then also find our choice in it, even if all of the options are not ideal and they're not options that we want, that we are still choosing, that there is a choice to be found in every situation. And so I think that, yeah, like when we're coming up against obstacles, it's kind of like, okay, what actually is happening here? And this obstacle, what does this obstacle bring out in me? Like, what is my response to this obstacle, whether it's frustration or anger or hopelessness? What is happening? What is being invoked in me through this? And what am I being called to do? Like, what does this actually mean for me? And sort of like from ideally a place of compassion for yourself and non-judgment, like, okay, what is it that is being drawn forward? And how can I make meaning and purpose out of this? I think that also another note as far as this new moon in Gemini with Venus square Saturn, there can be a sense of looking at where you're being distracted or where your energy is. In fact, as I'm saying that, I don't really like the word distracted because I think that it has such a negative moral connotation. And I think that Gemini, whether that is a person that has Gemini placements, rising sign, moon sign, personal planets there, folks that have that energy very strongly, and even any mutable energy in general, but especially Gemini, they really benefit from having several different things that they can cycle through. And so I think that so often in our current westernized culture that's focused on productivity at all costs, that is seen as being distracted, when sometimes that is actually the most life-giving and productive thing for a person to do, is to have several different things that they cycle through. But you know, I'm sure you have a sense for when it feels like you are dispersing your energy, your mental focus, your emotional focus in a way that is depleting your energy in some way. And so I think this is also something that Saturn brings in for us here. I think that ultimately so important to be kind to yourself through this process, whatever it is that's happening for you here. Now, the last piece of the astrology that I will share with you is we have Mars moving into Taurus. This is happening on Saturday the 8th. And Mars is about our ability to be direct, to be assertive. It is also connected with our drawing of boundaries. And it's also connected with things like anger and agitation and frustration, and the difference between acting in a way that is asserting versus aggressive. And I think that Mars can also be really I think the moon and Mars can both be connected to the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. And so it's that part of us that gets activated and that wants to protect ourselves. And it's at a very instinctual or biological level. So Mars and Taurus, you know, so we're going from Mars and Aries, which is supporting the ability, Mars and Aries supports the ability to act directly, decisively, to move very quickly and without hindrance. Whereas Mars and Taurus is more about moving in a way that is focused on maintaining consistency and developing and rooting into something. I also think it's really interesting that Mars is moving into a Venus-ruled sign, because Venus rules the sign of Taurus. And so there's this constant, like, going back to Venus and to Gemini, going back to that area of the sky. Now, the big part of this is that Mars will make a square to Pluto when it moves into Taurus. And so this can bring up themes around anger, agitation, frustration, anguish, power dynamics, domination and submissiveness, and things where there is this, like, Mars really wants to do what it wants. That's the feeling tone. It wants to act in a way that is unhindered. It wants to move directly towards something. And Pluto is about going very deep into the hidden. Pluto is a symbol of the things that we consciously or unconsciously reject or disown in some way. It's a symbol of the things that we keep secret or mysterious, either for a sense of safety and protectiveness or because we've just been conditioned to believe that there is something unacceptable about that kind of material. And so I think that this configuration has the possibility for really connecting us with experiences of anger or agitation or frustration that maybe have been pushed to the side and not experienced for whatever reason. And so I think this week, really important for you to notice if those feelings are coming up and to allow those to be in your awareness, to be in your experience, and to hold space for those feelings as best you can. What else did I want to say about this? I think that I also want to keep in mind too, this goes into the broader astrology, is that this means that Mars will eventually conjunct Uranus in July next month. And so we're also thinking about Mars moving towards this unbinding and freeing and radically shifting our ability to be direct and decisive and to experience a healthy sense of anger and a healthy sense of boundaries. But first, it's sort of like we get to experience Mars-Pluto, where we experience the more raw and possibly emotional and possibly nonverbal sense of anger, frustration, etc. And I mean, I don't know, you might be like Shawna, I'm not experiencing any of that. That might not be true for you. I think it really depends on your chart and your life and how you process and relate to Mars themes around assertiveness and power dynamics, and how you feel powerful or not in your life in general. I also want us to be thinking about this Sunday, so the 9th, the moon will move into Leo, and it will make a T-square with Mars and Pluto. So there's kind of this, this very dynamic, sort of tense aspect that happens. So this is especially a day where a lot of feelings could come up. And so I think especially this weekend, so important to focus on your experience. And I think that when we have Mars and Pluto, there can be a tendency to want to control other people in some way, to get them to be a certain way so that we feel better about ourselves, which is very natural. It's a very human thing to do. And so I think that it's important to remind yourself that you cannot control other people. You cannot be responsible for the thoughts, feelings, or behaviors of other people. Of course, you can have an impact and an influence on other people, but I think it's important to be in your truth, your integrity here, and to be aware of when maybe you start to modify yourself in order to get something out of someone. I want to read you, as I was preparing for this week, I was really thinking about the poem called The Guest House by Rumi, the 13th century mystic and poet. And I think that it just really speaks to the intention, maybe, that we want to have for this week. So, the guest house, or guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the sham, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Okay, so major themes this week are, we've talked about exchanging ideas, listening, talking, being curious, participating in the here and now and what is really real for you. And I think I want us to be thinking about this week as always, but also this week too. This is your process of becoming. So there's nothing that you need to do to get things right or to learn a lesson. You know, you are becoming, and that is a process always. I think it's also important to remember that your thoughts, feelings, and needs are valid, and that there is nothing wrong with your thoughts, feelings, and needs, that there is always valid, there's always validity there, and there's also a lot of information there too when we look at it through that guest house lens. You do not need to be fixed. You are simply becoming who you are. Okay. So I'm pulling from the Wild Unknown deck today. So the first card is the 10 of Cups, and it has 10 cups on it and these sort of connections between all of the cups. The 10 of Cups is such a culmination card, and it's really a card that is about having all of your emotional needs and desires met. Now, I pulled this reverse, so there's something here around maybe this is the topic, feeling, and also actually, frankly, as I'm thinking about this, there's cups being emotions, and it feels like it could be an emotional week. It could be like all of the cups are running. And even like the imagery in this card, there's these different colored rainbow lines that are moving from one cup to the other. And it makes me think of Mars-Pluto, and how sometimes when we're working with unconscious material and material that thoughts and feelings and ideas that maybe have been repressed or shunned in some way, that it creates like this tangle where, and not in a negative way, but that there are many different threads to explore. And I find in my clinical work that, you know, when someone has a problem, so to speak, when they're like, I have this thing that I just can't seem to figure out, that usually there's not just one source for that problem. I'm putting problem in air quotes. There's usually not one source for our dysfunction or for our suffering. It's usually a multitude of things that have come together like a tapestry to create this thing. And so we get into that, we bring healing to that through looking at all of the different threads, and through understanding and bringing insight and bringing compassion and awareness to what is happening. So we may go back to that in a moment. The next card that I pulled is the 4 of Cups. Actually, all of the cards are cups, so really interesting here. 4 of Cups is a couple of different things. 4 of Cups can be about, there is maybe something like a new thing, a new opportunity, a new idea that you have been or are ignoring. And there's something, like this card usually comes up when there's something really wonderful that's being presented to you, and you don't see it because you're not paying attention, or you're in your own head, or you're just like, yes, like you're so focused on one thing that you don't see something else that's in your peripheral vision. This card is also a symbol to simply meditate and be with yourself, and to focus on what is in front of you. And then the last card is the 9 of Cups. So the 9 of Cups is typically called the wish fulfillment card, and I really like that term for it, because it's about It's a symbol of the things that you have wanted in the past, that those are available to you. So it's actually quite a supportive and encouraging card, especially to get third in the line here, because the way that I'm reading this is that the main thing, the thing that's happening. So I pulled first card reversed, so 10 of Cups reversed. The main thing that's happening is there's kind of like this tangle of emotions. That's the way that I'm reading it. Is there's something here that feels like, oh, like how do I even begin to figure out what is going on here? And things feel complicated and messy. Cups can be emotions, but they can also be relationships as well. And so there's something here that feels very possibly that feels like WTF is going on. And I'm feeling the new moon and Venus and Jupiter and Mercury in this equation. So there's something here that feels difficult to figure out, and you may have like a mixture of feelings about it. Now there is an answer. There's like a very clear answer. I don't know, maybe it's an answer, maybe it's a new way of feeling or thinking. There's something here that is being offered to you. There's an opportunity, and it might be something that you don't immediately see or you don't quite expect. And I think this is typical when we're talking about a new moon period as well, because the moon is literally invisible to our eyes. So there's something here that's beginning, that's being offered that we don't quite see yet. And then as you accept or take advantage of this new thing, there is that sense of emotional satisfaction. And the way that I'm seeing this is there's kind of like a settling that happens when you look around at what other possibilities there might be for you. All right, that is your weekly astrology forecast for this week. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that something here resonated or was helpful for you. I hope that you have a most easeful week. And I'm sending you lots of love. As always, my name is Shawna McGrath. I am a psychotherapist and astrologer, and if you want to find out more about me and my work, you can find me on my website, theastropsyche.com. Okay, I'll see you soon. Have a great week. Bye.